What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, as we got another big one that came out on March 8th. This time I'm going over the latest offering from New Orleans groove metal, thrash metal pioneers, Exhorder, with DEFECTUM OMNIUM. This also, like I said, came out on March 8th, this time on Nuclear Blast Records, and this is the band's fourth album and their second one of this recent comeback run. I did actually review the last one, More into Southern Skies, when it came out in 2019. I thought that was a fantastic album. Great return for the pioneers of groove metal. And here we are with the second album of this run. Now, I will say, because like I've been talking about, this weekend was loaded with big releases from bands mainstream and underground alike. And I decided I wanted to go through this one because I've heard some differing opinions about this one. Like, I will say, between this, the Judas Priest, and Midnight reviews, this is going to be the one that's going to be the most challenging because this is very different for Exhorder in comparison to their first three albums, which, of course, Slaughter in the Vatican, classic debut. The Law, amazing follow-up. And then More in the Southern Skies, great return for them. This is notably different compared to those other three albums. First off, big lineup shift as former guitarist Vinny, I can't pronounce his last name, but longtime original member, is not in the band anymore, and I guess there was some controversy, and I guess he's reportedly bitter about all this, so in his place is Pat O'Brien, formerly of Nevermore, Monstrosity, and of course Cannibal Corpse. And pretty much after all that crazy stuff that happened with Pat, he eventually joined Exhorder a couple of years ago, and I think it's a good fit for him. It gives him a new place to kind of spread his wings a little bit. And I will say, one big thing about this album I loved was the lead work. Like, Pat's leads are just furious on here, and they can range, again, kind of like the Judas Priest and Midnight albums. They can kind of range from melody to shred to dive bombs. It just kind of goes all over the map. So Pat's definitely showcasing his soloing range on this entire album. But let's go ahead and talk about the song. So we kick things off with Wrath of Prophet. Why am I getting my F's and TH's mixed up? Wrath of Prophecies, excuse me. And this is really where you're going to get one major trope about this album, is this album is far less groove metal and definitely much more thrash metal. And thrash metal, the big band I compare this whole album to would be Exodus. There is so much Exodus going on here. It's almost like Exhorder wanted to write like the best B-sides of like modern Exodus, but done in their own way. Like the riffing here, not only on this track, but a lot of the thrash riffs pretty much everywhere just feel like Exodus to me. Although you get some blast beats that show up on here, which there's not many blast beats that pop up. I only think they only pop up on like 3 tracks. This, as well as Forever and Beyond Disrepair and Year of the Goat. Those would be the only tracks where you get blast beats at all. But also with Wrath of Prophecies, you do get some atonal riffs that come in towards the end before the big final breakdown. And I will say the breakdowns on this album are pretty solid. Like Exhorder, of course, like I said, being the pioneers of groove metal just a little bit before Pantera adopted that sound, they knew how to do breakdowns pretty damn well, and they show that they can still write some pretty catchy breakdowns. Under the Gaslight, the following track, this one's an interesting one because the drums and the bass lines build up, and first of all, I do have to say, Jens Bogren, who did the production on this album, like, he mixed and mastered More in the Southern Skies, but he wasn't involved with the actual production. Here, it's all Jens Bogren, and I think he does a very good job with the production and the mix. It definitely makes it sound tight and crunchy, and with a great mix where you can hear the bass, so I just wanted to comment on that real quick. But yeah, this song starts off with drums and a bass line, but the song itself, it's kind of an oddity. It's got some hardcore rhythms, but the riffs feel a little bit like Judas Priest. I've been saying Judas Priest a lot this week, not only because of the new album, but even yesterday when talking about the Midnight album, there was some Judas Priest nods peppered in there on a couple of songs. Then we get back to Forever and Beyond Disrepair, and this is where you get another slight trope. There's some punkiness and, dare I say, borderline grindcore at times, and it's really most felt on this track, because you get like these punky, grindy D beats and riffs, and then you get like machine gun riffs and blast beats that definitely kind of feel like early grindcore, like early Napalm Death a little bit. But you do get a really cool breakdown with some bends in the riffs, which I do love me some bends. And then the riff that closes the track almost reminds me of Metallica's Seek and Destroy. Mainly that ending riff to that song, you know, the da-na-na-na-na-na. That riff, you know what riff I'm talking about. And this riff at the end of Beyond and Forever Forever and Beyond Disrepair, I have been doing so many videos today, I'm losing my words. The riff at the end of this feels like Seek and Destroy is what I'm trying to get at. Then we get into The Tale of Unsound Minds. And this one brings in a dissonant riff to start off, and this is one of the only times on the album where I will say there's a dissonant riff. But then afterwards, well, the dissonant riff, but with some tasty drums on top, and then it turns doomy and sludgy, and that's another wrinkle that kind of comes up. Then again, you kind of heard a little bit of a sludginess on the previous three, but not as much. Here, the doominess and sludginess, it's very apparent, and it's definitely reminiscent of Crowbar. And then, while I'm on the subject of this song, Kyle Thomas's vocals on this track, he gets pretty high in his register, and I do have to say, Kyle's vocals, definitely not like what they used to be, like on the first two albums, where it's definitely comparable to Phil Anselmo. Here, it just sounds like his vocals have aged over the years, and they've kind of evolved into more, dare I say, kind of like a modern-day Eric Wagner from Trouble, may he rest in peace, which is kind of ironic considering Kyle, I don't know if he still is, but was in Trouble for a while as their frontman, so I can kind of see how being in Trouble kind of helped expand his horizons vocally, and definitely here on this track, he definitely showcases a higher range in his vocals, and I do have to say Kyle's vocals are pretty damn good on this album. There are a couple spots where they kind of felt a little bit off the riff in terms of the key, but for the most part he maintains himself pretty well. Then at the end of the song, it kind of gets thrashy. But then we get into a song like Divide and Conquer, where it's thrashy riffs with D beats, very much like Overkill or Exodus again, but with a more melodic solo. But now we get to Year of the Goat, and this one kind of goes all over the place. Has some low-end death metal tremolos and blasts that feel like early Morbid Angel, but then it goes into more of like a speed metal song because there's more speed metal riffs and D beats, and then you get a hardcore groove. So it's almost like a hybrid of hardcore, groove, speed metal, and death metal almost, but there's really no death growls on this album really at all. Taken by Flames, this one definitely kind of does a similar thing in terms of going all over the map. Starts off with the opening riff as my light flickered. The opening riff was like a slightly faster opening to the song Desecrator from Slaughter in the Vatican, and then it gets sludgy again, then you get some thrashy riffs coming back, but you get a really cool descending groove and dive bomb at the end. Then we get to the title track / Stolen Hope, and this was the longest track of the album at almost 7.5 minutes. Starts off with this dark chanting, which was cool for a little bit, but it kind of drags a little bit, and it does kind of hurt the song a little bit. But once those chants stop, you get thrash riffs, but they only show up in the beginning after the chants, which was kind of strange. But then it does turn into more or less a doom metal song, like almost like you took Alice in Chains and Trouble and you mixed it together. Even a bass line that was pretty notable on here, and then it ends with almost like an immolation type groove and solo. Then again, with the guitars being in C tuning or maybe even drop C, Yeah, it can definitely kind of give off a little bit of an immolation vibe, especially when you get these kind of grooves and riffs at the end of this song that kind of makes you think of immolation a little bit. Then we get into Three Stages of Truth slash Lacing the Well, which was the second longest at almost 7 minutes. And I actually like how this starts a lot more than the previous track. You get some acoustic guitars that feel sinister, but yet there's a beauty to it, almost like Opeth, which is odd, but it worked for me. And then afterwards, you get really kind of like you get like big chugging riffs on the verses, but a thrashy chorus and an awesome drum solo at the end. So it was almost like they wanted to go for like groovy verses, thrashy choruses on this track, which I actually kind of liked that formula. I thought it worked pretty well. Then we get into Sedition, where we get back to more of that punkiness, and this almost feels like more like a crossover thrash song, almost like Municipal Waste, but there's some grindy chugs towards the end. Desensitized. This is the song I feel like that sounded the most like Exodus. Kind of like Wrath of Prophecies, but also back here on Desensitized, and this almost feels like a song that could have been on Persona Non Grata, I will say. And then the final track, Your Six, one of the doomiest, sludgiest things on here. Like, again, crowbar feels all throughout, doomy breakdowns. But what was really cool, and probably one of the big standout moments on the album for me, these descending guitar harmonies towards the end of the song, it almost made me think of Symbolic era Death, like Symbolic and Sound of Perseverance era Death, because it has that tone and that feel to it. Then again, Pat O'Brien, heavily inspired by Chuck, so it's kind of prevalent there, but still, it was just kind of a nice little wrinkle they threw in on a more doomy, sludgy crowbar type song. So yeah, there was a lot to unpack with this album, because again, this album is very different from what Exhorder has done before, especially considering Kyle being the lone original member right now after Vinny left, and I guess there's beef between he and Kyle. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't really dig too deep into it. So, yeah, that's one big pro about this album. It tried to go for something different. Like, this almost doesn't really feel like a groove metal album really at all. This felt like a combination of thrash metal and sludge metal with little pepperings of punk and grind, only on a few tracks, but for the most part, it's just straight up thrash metal mixed in with sludge. So it doesn't really have that token Exhorder sound that we were all used to. But that is a big positive I give this album. It took chances to do some different things that they never really tried before, like in a song like Year of the Goat, where they got flat out death metal, like Morbid Angel-esque, and then even on songs like Forever and Beyond Disrepair, getting more almost grindcore. Now, as far as any negatives, I will say, like, particularly on the two long tracks, they both kind of went for a similar trope, where you have an intro, then it turns into a thrashy riff, but in the case of the title track slash Stolen Hope, it goes from thrash to doom metal, which is kind of strange. But then with the other track, Three Stages of Truth slash Lacing the Well, it mostly stays more or less chuggy but thrashy at the same time. But they both kind of went for a similar trope, and that's starting off with an intro before it unleashes into wherever it's going. And of course, perhaps another negative, some of these riffs, like I said, they're very Exodus derived, and they can kind of feel like they're copying Exodus a little bit. It's like rubbing on that line of crossing in from being like something of their own into just flat out being like Exodus. So it's just rubbing on that line ever so slightly. So it does have a little bit of a derivative nature when it comes to that. But even if it's derivative or not, they kicked ass. I thought these thrashy Exodus style riffs kicked ass. So overall, when you combine everything I've talked about, and I understand this is a pretty long review, but that's because there was just so much to unpack with this, I'm going to give this a 3.5 out of 5. I thought this was a really good album. I don't think it's as strong as Born to Southern Skies, and that's only because that has more of that familiar Exhorder sound. But I do give them credit where it's due on this album. They decided to do something a little bit, well, not a little bit, a lot different. And for the most part, I think it paid off. So I know this album's gotten some mixed opinions, but for me, I thought this was a pretty good album. Nothing more, nothing less. But of course, those are just my thoughts. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun jazz. And until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.